Hello, this is Sheem77722, and this is my CPU cooling fan installation tutorial. Now this is my first attempt at this, and I'll tell you some of the things that I learned installing a CPU fan for the first time. Now my original cooling fan, an Intel stock cooler, was not sufficient to get my computer to run well. And so the first step is to remove everything extraneous, as we need to remove the motherboard to put in this new big fan here. Yeah, the Hypercooler N520, which I picked up for $44 from Tiger Direct. So here's some tools we need, and I'll be using rubbing alcohol as my solvent. And just here's the stuff taken out of the package and the instructions. Now read the instructions. They're big, in this case, lots of languages, and they're not very descriptive, which is why I'm making this video. But the instructions still give you important information. Now I've taken out my wonderful graphics card. Here are the hard drives out. And so you can see here, it has four little plastic tab thingies. Now you have to move it in the opposite direction of the arrow to take it out. Your fan will be different. Now it's a little bit fiddly, but once you get it out, you'll see that you've dirty CPU. Now that CPU will be covered in the old thermal paste, and that thermal paste has to be removed thoroughly, which is a little bit tough, and that's where the microfiber cleaning cloth and the rubbing alcohol comes in. Now you need to scrub all of the old thermal paste off. Now I did my first pass with a paper towel, as to not get my microfiber cleaning cloth so dirty, and then I went at it with the microfiber cloth and the rubbing alcohol. Now I did find that a razor blade helped to get some of the stuff that was really dried on, but as you can see, I wasn't able to get all of it off. But according to a forum posting and a discussion with my computer expert cousin, that's not really an issue. It's not ideal, but it's not that big of an issue. So here you can see the surface area of the old cooler, the Intel stock cooler, and you can see that the new cooler we're putting in has a much bigger surface area, which means more heat transfer, making it a more efficient cooler, as well as other features like having two fans and many fins, again increasing the surface area and the efficiency of the cooler. So this is the fan, and you can see the back plate sitting there, and the back plate is actually attached to the back of the motherboard, and that's what gives the fan support. Now this is quite a heavy fan, and that makes it very necessary. So you can see a little tube of thermal compound right here. Now any thermal compound will do. I just used the stuff that came with the fan because the other stuff I bought was crap. Spending $7 on bargain bin thermal paste was not a good idea. The next step in this install is putting the thermal paste onto the CPU. Now this technique I saw on a forum, which was to put a large glob into the center of the CPU and to push down the cooler, supposedly spreading out thermal paste. Now I was a little bit skeptical of this, so I took the fan off and I took a look, and it did not work very well. It was very sporadically spread out, and it didn't cover the whole CPU. So I instead attempted a different technique, which involved using the edge of a razor blade or a credit card to spread out the thermal compound over the chip. Now I found this to work quite well, so I'll explain it here. So first you want to put a glob on the chip, and then you just want to use the edge of the credit card or razor blade. I used a razor blade, and just drag it across, and you can create a nice thin layer, and just keep doing it until the chip is fully covered, and you'll end up with finished results like the one that I have there, or better, hopefully better. Now small little grooves in the compound are fine, because as you push the cooler down, the cooler will automatically settle those out. But again, as I was saying, the thinner the better. Most sources that I found said that the thickness of a piece of paper was ideal. The next major step in the process is actually putting the fan onto the board. But in order to make sure that the fan is pointing in the right direction, you're going to want to mark with a little arrow the direction of airflow. Now by looking at diagrams or even powering the fan, if you have a way of doing that, you can figure out which direction that is. Otherwise, you can do what I did, and the first time I put the fan on the board, it was facing in the opposite direction, and I had to take it off and do it again, which was very irritating. Next, with the board out of the case, we're going to want to line up the fan on the board. Now I found the easiest way was to flip the board upside down and put it on top of the fan, as the fan was quite heavy. And I actually had somebody hold the board for me while I put the backplate on, put on the screws, and with a little adapter that came with the fan, you just use a screwdriver to tighten up the bolts. And you don't want to tighten them up too quickly. When doing this, you need to follow the instructions. That is, to go diagonally across. Start with one corner, then tighten the screw that is diagonally across. Tighten that up loosely, and do this for the next two. And you don't want to tighten all of the screws at once. You want to keep them loose and then keep tightening them as you go around until they're at an appropriate tightness. Now, obviously, if you screw them in too tight, you can crack your board. So you just want to be careful and do to a tightness that feels reasonable, which is that they're not going to come off with just simple vibration, but your board isn't going crack, crack, crack as you start to tighten it up. With the fan securely attached, we can now put the board back into the case. Now, that involves doing back up all of the screws that we had to undo to remove the board. Now, double check and make sure you have them all in, because they ground certain components on your motherboard, and leaving a screw out is a bad idea. So make sure you do a double count just to make sure. Just reattach the CPU fan for now. I'll explain why in a sec. Now, this cooler, because of its dual fans, requires a second connector to be attached. I just double check that before you plug it back into the board. Plugging the fan back into the board is as simple as locating the CPU fan connector, which is this little 4-pin one here, and just plugging it in, which can be a little bit tough. I actually had to use a screwdriver to attach the connector. Now, because I switched from a 4-pin fan before to a 3-pin, the BIOS of my computer had some issues. It wouldn't post. So in order to fix this, I had to reset the BIOS or CMOS or something. It was explained to me, but I don't really remember. But it involved taking out the little battery that you see on your board for about 5 minutes, and all of the settings and stuff were reset to their default settings, and it just redetected all of the hardware the next time it booted. Now, that required me to go into the setup and put in the new time and stuff like that, and any custom settings, which was a little bit irritating, but it was done pretty quickly, and my computer started with no issue once that was complete. Back to the process. Now, I plugged in my computer. Obviously, I had to plug in the motherboard power supply and any of the other motherboard power things, but I didn't put any of the other cards or hard drives or anything back in, because I just wanted to turn on the computer, and the CPU fans will spin up, and obviously it'll beep and complain because it's not detecting any hardware. But you can see if your fan is blowing in the right direction. If it isn't, like, again, the first time I tried this, it wasn't, you're going to have to take it out and readjust it. You're also going to want to remove the thermal compound you already had on there, and clean both surfaces, and just start the process over again. So once the CPU fan is blowing in the right direction, you're just going to put all your hardware back in, and then you're going to just want to test your computer. Now, the side of my case had this duct that fit over the CPU fan, and I just had to remove it. It was just simply just taking off 4 screws, and that was the only other real issue I had. Besides, of course, my computer not refusing to post. And also, you're going to want to make sure you plug in all of your case connectors down at the bottom. I actually forgot to plug in my sound connectors, and the next day when I went to go plug in my headphones, I was a little bit surprised. Other than that, that's a pretty simple process. It took me about 30 minutes to do it, including the screw-ups. And other than being a little bit finicky, it was pretty easy. So that's about it. Thanks for watching, and good luck with all your computer building woes.